British farmers are being pushed to find new sources of income, like converting their land into campsites. Now, this is in response to the upcoming changes to inheritance tax rules. Of course, this is a Labour policy. The Daily Express revealed this yesterday. Starting next year, farmland and other agricultural assets valued over £1 million will no longer be fully exempt from inheritance tax. Instead, any amount above that threshold will be taxed at 20%, ending a tax exemption that has been in place since 1984. To discuss this, I am pleased to welcome farmer Andrew Ward. Andrew, thank you so much for joining myself on the panel tonight.
Hello, great. Hello, thanks for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. It's a really sad day that we're having to see farmers obviously, put the campsites on their farms to avoid this. But tell us a little bit about what's going on here.
Well, I think the biggest problem we've got is farming at the moment is in the worst state it has been for years, and I probably mean as long as I've been farming. It's not just the problem of profitability. We've got regulation, we've got red tape. Yes, we've got inheritance tax, but I think the biggest problem we're facing at the moment is the weather, because everything we're doing, we're trying to get harvest that will be ready in June or July, August time. And the weather just trumps all these things, and sorry for the pun in that, but the weather just trumps everything regarding inheritance tax, because at the moment, the condition of the farm, the crops came out the winter in really good condition, but we've had so little rain at the moment, the crops are nearly dying on their feet. We've got absolutely rock bottom prices. The prices we've got at the moment are the same as they were 20 years ago. So, when you just take that in, where you sell our crops to make food, we're getting paid the same as 20 years ago. Yet the money that we are investing in these crops is at today's prices. So how many people are working for the same return as they were 20 years ago? So this is the problem we've got. And when you start to look at the inheritance tax, campsites, as you say, the problem we've got is that, yes, we need to do other things. We need to diversify to get extra income. But the minute we start to make our farm more valuable, we pay even more inheritance tax. So it's just a crazy situation to be in.
Yeah, Andrew, before I bring the panel in, because everyone wants to ask a question here, how much of an impact is this really going to have? And how many farmers have you spoken to that have obviously, are going to fall under this inheritance tax change? Because obviously Labour's argument is that only a small percentage of farmers are really going to be impacted. Is that true in your experience?
It's absolute rubbish in my experience. And you go out there in the countryside and you ask farmers who are in the know, obviously, and they're out there working, and the families have been farming generations on many areas all over the country. And it's absolutely ludicrous to say that the government say there's only a minority are going to be affected. When you start to look at the surveys that have been done and the research that have been done, there's somewhere between 70 and 80% of farms are going to be affected. But we also just need to mention it's not just farmers here that's going to be impacted on these government changes. Yeah. It's all businesses that are trying to hand things down to the next generation. So we're saying that there's no business should pay inheritance tax, not just farmers, nobody, because we've all paid our taxes over the years. When we make a profit, when we do certain things to the farm, we've all paid taxes. That it's just not right that any business, not just farming, pays inheritance tax or has to pay inheritance tax when it's handed down to the next generation.
Have you been getting a load of spam in your email recently? What about random calls? It's really annoying, isn't it? Data brokers are out there collecting your personal information. Anything from your email, your full name, your address, and even your political affiliation. Cyber criminals can even use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick people into sending them money. And it gets even worse. People out there are getting huge loans taken out in their names without even knowing about it. But don't worry, because the sponsor of this video, Incogni, can help. They reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information is removed from their databases. Incogni continues to make sure that your data is removed automatically from the internet via repeated removal requests. So, how can you get started? Well, step one, hit the link in the description, create an Incogni account and tell us whose data you'd like removed. Step two, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf. Step three, sit back, relax and watch Incogni work. They will update consistently so you know when your data has been removed. Incogni is risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it for yourself and you'll get a free refund if the service isn't for you. So take back your personal data today with Incogni. Use the code GBNews using the link in the description below, and you'll get 60% off an annual payment plan.
Yeah, hi. I think I agree with everything you say, and my heart goes out to farmers. Everybody knows this. As a doctor, I really try and encourage people all of the time to eat well, but we don't seem to have that same understanding in society of how critical our farmers are for our future food security. How do we get that message through and start mobilising everyday people to back the farmers and say, well, hang on a minute, we want our food produced here and we'll do whatever we can to support the farmers?
It's a really interesting and a great comment or question. And I think the problem we've got, though, is at the moment that food has been too cheap for too long. That's the biggest thing. We've had subsidies in the past that hasn't just benefited farmers, such as myself, it's benefited everybody in the country, because the subsidies have kept us going, they've kept food prices low, so everybody out in the high street and high street and your public are used to paying cheap or used to paying not a lot of money for food. So food is cheap. And I think at the moment, the UK food, we are the third cheapest food in the world behind America and Singapore. Well, that, in my view, is
Andrew,
not
just
a tag to be proud of.
very briefly on that, because, you know, our audience will suggest that, you know, that they feel food prices have gone up dramatically. Are you saying that if the government were to get rid of this subsidy, we'd have even higher food prices? Because I think maybe it's cheap on the bulk buy for the supermarkets, but it doesn't feel cheap to consumers at home.
No, you're quite right. It's not. But you just say if the government are to get rid of the subsidies, the government have got rid of the subsidies.
Sorry, apologies.
This next year is the last year we're getting. They're dropping and dropping. And the Labour government at the moment are saying that they are giving the biggest budget to agriculture that's in history, as £5 billion over 2 years. That's not really right, because it's been 2.4 billion a year since 2014. What we're not saying, or what we're not hearing, is that they are actually cutting our D-link payments, which is the payment that is in relation to the subsidies that we have been getting. They've cut that last year's payment by 76%. So if you add that into the budget of 5 billion, they're actually giving less than any government has done. But going back to the price of food, it's just not right. When you see the price of food, the public are paying more for the price of food, yes. We are receiving less for the crops we grow. Somewhere in that equation, there is something seriously wrong. And the whole food system in this country has broken. And it's the supermarkets are taking big profits. That needs to come further down the food chain to us, because we're looking after the environment, we're looking after nature, wildlife. Everything is on our hands.
Yeah, I think the work the farmers do is radically underappreciated, and I think the one thing that's not being talked about is actually the effect that this is actually having on farmers themselves. You know, the mental health of farmers was up in front of a select committee quite a little while ago. I think it was raised by Neil Parish, if I remember correctly. And, you know, it's just not taken seriously, despite the fact that, you know, it's in the blood of these families. You know, it's part of what you do. You sacrifice so much for the country, and yet this government just turned around and basically just smacks you in the face. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. But how are farmers kind of bonding together over this? Is there a real network being developed here?
Well, there is. And just before I touch on to that, you are quite right. You know, the stresses and strains of farming and producing food and actually working and trying to make a profit is just huge at the minute. And I think farming has the highest suicide rate of any industry. And we've got the issue at the minute now where we've got elderly farmers and farmers who aren't very well, who won't make the 7-year gifting rule, are now saying that they think they don't want to be here come April 26, because that's going to put a burden on their family. So they are sort of considering suicide, they're considering ending their lives, because they don't want to burden their family with an inheritance tax bill that the family can't afford to pay. So, you know, so that is a huge issue. The mental strains and stress in agriculture at the moment are absolutely massive.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about how farming is so tough just because of all these external pressures. You know, you talked about the weather, you talked about the impact of supermarkets squeezing margins. Now, I think the last time we saw such a radical secular shift in land use was in the post-war period, when lots of landed gentry and big estates had to find new uses for their land. But actually, that had lots of benefits. It had huge increases in accessibility for the public across the countryside. We had things like Alton Towers, Longleat. Shouldn't we be supporting farmers in actually diversifying and making sure that their businesses are fit for the future?
Absolutely, we should, because at the moment, our food security, our self-security, the amount of food we produce in the country, we're sitting at around about 62%, whereas in the 80s, it was around 80%. So we are dropping all the time. But the problem we've got is that a lot of the food that's produced outside this country is produced and grown to far lower welfare standards than we produce here. Now, I'm going to mention one crop here and one food that we eat that everybody says we shouldn't eat, and that's sugar. I grow sugar beet, and on the shelf, that is put in a packet, and it's silver spoon sugar. Now, next to that packet, you'll see Tate and Lyle sugar. Now, Tate and Lyle, quite a lot of that comes from Australia, South America, and that is grown from sugar cane. Now, sugar cane and Tate and Lyle sugar is grown with 23 chemicals that I am not allowed to use in growing sugar beet. Yet those two products will sit on a shelf next to each other. The Tate and Lyle product is allowed to carry a Union Jack simply because it's put in a packet in this country. Now, that's not unique to sugar. So many products and food things are allowed to have a Union Jack on the packet because it's packed in this country, not grown or produced in this country. And this is where we need some fundamental changes to the way our food is produced and marketed and sold.
So it's obviously a very difficult time for British farmers at the moment. Andrew, what can GB News viewers and listeners do to help them out?
Well, it's great, thank you. And I always enjoy coming on here, and I've got some good friends at GB News. I'm on here quite a lot. And you mentioned a few minutes ago about what are we doing? Well, I'm part of a small group of farmers. We started having a protest. The first one was on November the 19th last year, and we had around 50,000 people in London. We're seeing on the screen now some of these protests. And that was the first one we had, and we've organised other ones around the country. And the last one we had was on Pancake Day on March the 4th. And that was purely, we had that one because we wanted to highlight to the public and to the government the amount of capital investment needed to simply put food on plates. And being Pancake Day, we thought, what better way to show the machinery, having paraded in London, on what makes the ingredients to make a pancake. We didn't want hundreds of tractors that's been in London. We simply wanted to highlight the value of machinery. We had 8 pieces of machinery in London. Only one of those was a tractor. We had harvesters, we had planting machines, we had a sprayer. Those 8 machines came to £3.2 million.
Wow.
And you needed all those machines to make a pancake. Now, the public will say, oh, well, all those machinery, if you can afford to buy that machinery, you can afford to pay inheritance tax. Most farmers do not buy that machinery. It's paid for monthly, the same as everybody else would when you're buying a sofa, whether you're buying a TV or a car or a house on a mortgage. We can't afford to buy that machinery. We'll take it on a monthly payment, and then after 4 years, it goes back, and we start another cycle of paying for these things monthly, because a lot of these machines, sugar beet harvester, combine harvester, you're looking at £600,000 to £700,000.
Incredible. It really is, Andrew. And look, we want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. It's an ever-developing story, and good luck with your campaign. Andrew Ward, farmer there. Thank you very much.